Have you ever noticed something unsettling, almost unfair? Why is it that the moment you stop chasing, stop explaining yourself, stop trying to be seen, people suddenly start paying attention? Why does distance create gravity and silence create noise? There is a strange law at work beneath the surface of human relationships, a law most people feel, but almost no one can name. And if you're honest with yourself, you've felt it too. There was a time when you cared deeply, maybe too deeply. You checked your phone more than you want to admit. You waited for replies. You adjusted your tone, your timing, your personality, just to stay relevant in someone else's world. And the more you tried to hold things together, the more they seemed to slip through your fingers. But then something shifted. Maybe you got tired. Maybe you stopped explaining. Maybe you simply focused inward on your own life, your own rhythm, your own silence. And that's when it happened. The messages started coming in. The respect you never asked for appeared. People who once ignored you suddenly wanted your time. Not because you changed your face, not because you learned a trick, but because something invisible inside you moved. Most people spend their entire lives trying to become more interesting, more impressive, more desirable, without ever realizing that attraction doesn't come from effort. It comes from absence of need. There is something deeply magnetic about a person who no longer begs the world to confirm their worth. Someone who is not loud, but grounded. Not distant, but complete. Ancient traditions spoke of this as presence. Modern psychology dances around it without naming it, but everyone feels it when they encounter it. You can't fake it, you can't buy it, and the moment you try to perform it, it disappears, because this force isn't about power over others, it's about power within. And here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. The more you need someone to choose you, the less they feel free to do so. Need creates pressure. Pressure kills desire. Yet the world keeps teaching the opposite. Try harder. Be more available. Prove your value. Show them who you are. Oh, but what if everything you were taught about connection was upside down? What if the real transformation doesn't begin when you gain something, but when you let go of the need to be chosen at all? There is a reason certain people walk into a room and don't need to announce themselves. A reason their silence speaks louder than others' effort. A reason they are remembered without trying to be unforgettable. And once you see what's really happening beneath that surface, you'll never look at relationships, attention, or success the same way again. Because the moment you stop needing, something ancient wakes up. At first, it doesn't announce itself loudly. It slips in quietly, almost shyly, disguised as something ordinary, a dream that feels too vivid to ignore. Not chaotic, not random, but structured, symbolic, lingering in your chest long after you wake up. You don't just remember it, you feel it. Or maybe it shows up as a sensation in your body, a sudden tightness in the chest for no medical reason, a pressure behind the eyes, a heaviness that arrives out of nowhere when you're surrounded by people and vanishes the moment you're alone. You try to explain it logically. Stress, fatigue, overthinking, that's what you tell yourself. But deep down, something feels off. As if reality itself is trying to speak in a language you were never taught how to understand. It often happens during transitions, moments when your life looks fine from the outside, but something inside you feels misaligned. You have responsibilities, you function, you perform. Yet there's a quiet dissatisfaction humming beneath everything. You start noticing patterns. You think about someone intensely, and they reach out hours later. You feel an urge to avoid a place or a decision, and later realize you narrowly escaped something damaging. You feel drained after certain conversations, energized after others, without any obvious explanation. And the most confusing part? These moments don't happen when you're distracted or chasing. They happen when you pause. In the shower, late at night, while driving in silence, In those rare moments when the noise fades and you're left alone with yourself. That's when the whispers get louder. Many people experience this but dismiss it. They label it coincidence, imagination, mood swings. Not because it isn't real, but because acknowledging it would force a deeper question. What if something inside me is awake and I've been ignoring it? There's a reason modern life keeps you busy. Notifications, deadlines, conversations without depth, constant stimulation. Stillness is dangerous because stillness reveals. And when you finally slow down, even briefly, you may notice something unsettling. Your body reacts before your mind does. Your intuition speaks before your logic approves. Your emotions signal truth faster than your thoughts can rationalize it away. This is where confusion begins for most people. They feel something is happening, but they don't know how to frame it. They sense a pull inward, yet the world keeps pulling them outward. They feel disconnected from others, yet strangely closer to themselves. And that creates tension. You start questioning your relationships. Why certain connections feel heavy, why others feel empty despite constant interaction, why approval no longer satisfies the way it used to. You may even feel guilty for this shift, as if wanting solitude means something is wrong with you, as if pulling back means you're failing at being human. But what if the discomfort isn't a flaw? What if it's a signal? Throughout history, inner shifts were never described as comfortable. They were described as unsettling, disorienting, even frightening at first, because they disrupt the identity you've been performing, not the self you truly are. And here's the part no one prepares you for. When this internal tension begins, external validation starts losing its grip. Compliments feel hollow, attention feels temporary, approval feels borrowed. You don't want more people, you want more truth. And that's when the real mystery emerges. Why do these sensations intensify precisely when you stop chasing attention? Why does your inner world become louder the moment you stop needing to be seen? And what exactly is trying to surface when the noise finally dies down? Because once this process starts, it doesn't stop quietly. It asks something of you. So the real question isn't whether these signs mean something. It's whether you're ready to understand what they've been pointing to all along. There is a moment, subtle, almost invisible, when the first real signal appears. Most people mistake it for exhaustion, for boredom, for emotional numbness, but it is none of those. The first true spiritual signal is this. External validation begins to lose its emotional effect on you, not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly, unmistakably. Praise feels lighter than it used to. Criticism doesn't pierce as deeply. Attention satisfies for seconds instead of hours. Approval lands and evaporates. At first, this feels unsettling. You wonder if something is wrong with you, if you're becoming cold, detached, disconnected. But ancient teachings described this exact phase thousands of years ago, and they warned that those who misunderstand it often turn back out of fear. Because when validation stops feeding you, the mind panics. It asks, if their approval no longer defines me, then who does? This is the beginning of internal authority. Old traditions spoke of it as a transition from outer orientation to inner alignment. Modern language calls it emotional independence, but the experience itself has always been the same. You stop outsourcing your sense of worth. And here's what most people don't realize. This shift doesn't make you less human. It makes you less programmable. Think about how society trains us from the beginning. Good behavior is rewarded, acceptance is conditional, belonging is earned by performance. Over time, the nervous system learns a dangerous equation. I am valuable only when others confirm it. So when confirmation disappears or stops satisfying, the ego feels threatened. But the signal isn't a loss, it's a withdrawal, not of love, but of dependency. This is why, during this phase, many people experience physical sensations. A pressure in the chest, a strange calm mixed with anxiety, moments of clarity followed by doubt. Your system is recalibrating. You're no longer chasing emotional sugar, quick hits of validation that spike and crash. You're learning to generate stability internally, and stability is rare, which is why it changes how people respond to you. Here's something few people say out loud. When you stop needing approval, you stop emitting emotional noise. Desperation has a frequency, so does anxiety. So does the subtle hunger to be chosen. And the human nervous system detects it instantly, even if the conscious mind can't explain why. This is why certain people feel heavy to be around, and others feel grounding. Not because one is better, but because one is internally dependent and the other is internally anchored. This anchoring creates what ancient texts referred to as presence. Presence isn't charisma, it's not confidence tricks, it's not dominance, it's coherence. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions are no longer organized around being liked, something extraordinary happens. You become unpredictable, not chaotic, but authentic. You respond instead of react. You choose instead of chase. And that shift is deeply unsettling to a world built on performance. This is why people often lean in when you pull back without you trying. Your silence carries weight. Your no sounds clean. Your attention feels earned, not automatic. And the most paradoxical part, you didn't do anything. You stopped doing something. You stopped feeding the illusion that your value lives outside of you. This is the first secret most never cross, because it feels like standing without armor. No constant reassurance. No emotional safety net built from other people's opinions. Just you, and something steadier underneath. And once this signal appears, it never fully goes away. You can distract yourself. You can return to old habits. But you'll always remember how it felt to not need permission to exist. This is where attraction quietly reorganizes itself around you. Not because you're trying to pull anyone closer, but because you're no longer pulling from them. If this resonates, even slightly, it means this process has already started for you. And if it has, you're not watching this by accident. Take a moment to acknowledge that. A simple gesture helps anchor awareness, a like, a quiet subscription, not as validation, but as a way of stepping into this circle of understanding. Because once internal authority begins to replace external approval, the next thing that surfaces is far more confronting and far more liberating. What happens when the part of you that needed to be accepted finally lets go? I didn't notice the change the day it began. It announced itself later, quietly, in the aftermath. At that time, my life looked functional on the surface. I had conversations, plans, messages coming in. But inside, I was exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. I remember one specific evening. The light in the room was dim, almost yellow, the kind that makes shadows stretch longer than they should. My phone was face down on the table, vibrating every few minutes. Messages, notifications, invitations that didn't feel like invitations anymore. They felt like obligations. And for the first time, I didn't reach for it, not out of discipline, not out of strategy, out of something closer to surrender. I felt an unfamiliar sensation in my chest. Not sadness, not relief, but space. As if something that had been gripping me for years finally loosened its fingers. That night, I didn't answer anyone. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. I simply stayed. And what surprised me wasn't the silence. It was what emerged inside it. Memories surfaced. Old desires I had buried to stay acceptable. Thoughts I used to silence because they didn't fit the image I was maintaining. I realized how much of my life had been shaped around being needed, being useful, being available. I had confused importance with exhaustion. Days passed, then weeks. Something strange happened. People who were used to instant access to me began reaching out differently. Their messages were longer, more thoughtful. Some asked if I was okay. Not because I disappeared, but because my energy had shifted. Others faded, and that hurt, but not in the way I expected. It wasn't rejection, it was revelation. I saw clearly who connected to me, and who connected to what I provided. There was one moment that crystallized everything. I met someone I used to chase emotionally. Same place, same environment, but the dynamic felt reversed. I listened more than I spoke. I didn't over-explain. I didn't try to be impressive, and I noticed something subtle. They leaned in, not physically, energetically. They asked questions, paused when I spoke, remembered details I never thought mattered. That's when it hit me. Nothing about my personality had changed. My relationship to myself had. I no longer needed the interaction to validate my worth. And because of that, the interaction became free. No pressure, no performance, no hunger hiding beneath politeness. It felt clean. Later, alone again, I understood something that still echoes today. When you stop asking others to fill the spaces you refuse to face within yourself, those spaces stop screaming. They soften, and something deeper takes their place. Since then, I've heard similar stories whispered by people who thought they were alone in this shift. Someone who stopped overworking to prove value and was suddenly respected more. Someone who stopped chasing relationships and attracted healthier ones. Someone who embraced solitude and discovered peace they didn't know was missing. Different lives, same pattern. The moment you stop grasping, reality rearranges itself around you. Not instantly, not magically, but unmistakably. And here's the part that stays with me the most. This transformation doesn't make you isolated. It makes you selective. It doesn't strip away love. It removes dependency. It doesn't harden you. It grounds you. If any part of this mirrors something you've lived, a moment, a feeling, a quiet internal shift you couldn't explain, I want you to acknowledge it, share it. Write in the comments about a time when you felt a sign, a withdrawal, a pull inward that changed how you relate to people or to yourself. I read these, and sometimes I mention them, because these stories aren't random, they're echoes. And the truth is, what happened to me wasn't the end of the journey. It was the threshold. Because once you stop reaching outward for approval, you're forced to confront something far more powerful and far more uncomfortable, waiting inside. What happens when the part of you that depended on others finally falls silent and something else begins to speak? Once the need for external validation loosens its grip, something else begins to surface. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with a precision that can no longer be ignored. This is the second great spiritual signal, and almost everyone misinterprets it. It shows up as a growing intolerance for what is misaligned. You begin to feel it before you can explain it. Certain conversations suddenly feel draining instead of stimulating. Certain environments feel heavy, even if nothing wrong is happening. Certain habits that once distracted you now feel empty, almost irritating. And here's the part that confuses people the most. Nothing externally has changed. You have. This signal is not emotional instability. It's discernment awakening. Ancient teachings describe this as the moment when inner truth becomes louder than social conditioning. Your nervous system starts rejecting what no longer fits your internal structure. Think about it. You can't enjoy pretending once you've tasted authenticity. You can't crave attention once you've felt presence. You can't numb yourself once you've felt clarity. So the body speaks. A tightness when you say yes, but mean no. A fatigue that appears only around certain people. A sudden clarity that arrives after leaving a room, not entering it. This isn't coincidence, it's feedback. Most people ignore it because responding to it would require change. And change threatens familiarity, even when familiarity is painful. But this signal exists for a reason. It's the internal compass recalibrating. And once you recognize it, you gain access to something practical, something you can apply immediately. Here is the technique. It's simple, but it's not easy. For the next few days, stop asking yourself, what should I do? What do they expect from me? What will make this easier? Instead, ask this, and pause long enough to feel the answer. What costs me energy after it's done? Not during, after. Pay attention to the aftertaste of your interactions. Some things feel neutral, some feel nourishing, some leave residue. That residue is information. Your body does not lie, but it speaks softly. When you consistently override it, you teach yourself to distrust your own signals. When you listen, even quietly, something changes. You start making cleaner decisions. You stop over-explaining. You choose fewer things, but better ones. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your life becomes lighter. This isn't about cutting people off. It's about honoring alignment. You're not rejecting the world. You're selecting your reality. Another practical reflection you can use immediately is this. At the end of the day, ask yourself one question, without judgment. Where today did I abandon myself to be accepted? Don't analyze. Don't justify. Just notice. Awareness alone begins the recalibration, because every time you override your internal signal for approval, you weaken your center, and every time you honor it, you strengthen your presence. This is why people who feel grounded don't chase. They choose. They aren't cold. They're clear. And clarity is powerful. Here's the paradox most never understand. The more aligned you become internally, the fewer people will resonate with you. But the deeper those connections will be. Quantity fades. Quality intensifies. Opportunities stop coming from desperation and start coming from recognition. And this is where the real transformation accelerates. Because once you can recognize misalignment, once you can feel it in your body, not just think about it, you become very difficult to manipulate, very difficult to pressure, very difficult to distract. But this is not the deepest signal. There is one that appears later, quieter, rarer, almost sacred. It doesn't come as discomfort. It comes as stillness, and almost no one recognizes it when it arrives. If you want to understand that final signal and what it reveals about who you are becoming, make sure you're subscribed. This path isn't walked loudly, but it is walked together, because what comes next isn't about improving your life. It's about meeting the part of you that no longer needs to be improved at all. There is a moment in this journey that almost no one talks about, not because it's secret, but because it cannot be explained easily. It arrives after the noise fades, after the hunger for approval dissolves, after misalignment becomes intolerable. It arrives as stillness, not emptiness, not boredom, stillness with weight. You may notice it first in ordinary moments, waking up before the alarm, not anxious, not excited, just present. Sitting somewhere familiar and suddenly feeling as if time has slowed, looking at people you once needed, and realizing the need is gone. And with that stillness comes a quiet realization that changes everything. You no longer feel pulled by the world. You feel rooted within yourself. Ancient teachings describe this as the point where the inner and outer stop fighting each other. Christian mystics spoke of it as resting in the word. Eastern traditions called it non-attachment. Modern physics hints at it when it speaks of coherence, systems no longer leaking energy through internal conflict. But the experience itself feels the same across cultures and centuries. You stop trying to become and start being. This is the deepest signal, the one that appears only after everything false has been gently stripped away. No drama, no fireworks, just a calm knowing, I am not missing anything. And this is where fear often tries one last time to intervene. Because if you don't need validation, if you don't need permission, if you don't need to prove your worth, then what motivates you? The answer is uncomfortable for the ego, and liberating for the soul. Truth replaces urgency. Purpose replaces performance. Alignment replaces ambition driven by fear. You act, not to be seen, but because it's true. And here's the paradox few expect. This state doesn't make you passive. It makes you precise. You speak less, but your words land deeper. You choose fewer paths, but they unfold with less resistance. You attract fewer people, but those who arrive recognize you instantly. This is what ancient texts meant when they said, "The kingdom is within," not a place, a state. When the inner world settles, the outer world reorganizes. And yes, this is the moment where life starts responding differently. Opportunities appear without force. Respect arrives without demand. Love becomes a choice, not a rescue mission. Because you are no longer broadcasting lack, you are broadcasting presence, and presence is rare. If this resonates even quietly, take a moment now, subscribe to this channel, like this video, not as a transaction, but as a signal. This content isn't created for profit or performance. It's created out of passion, out of a deep respect for those walking this path in silence. Every subscription strengthens this community of people who value depth over noise, truth over performance. Now return with me. There is something even more unsettling about this stillness. Once it arrives, you cannot unsee the world. You start noticing how much of society is driven by fear disguised as ambition. How many relationships are built on unconscious bargaining? How many lives are lived as reactions, not choices? And something inside you refuses to participate anymore. Not from arrogance, from clarity. You no longer argue with reality. You cooperate with it. And this cooperation feels effortless. But here's the final twist. This state doesn't isolate you from humanity. It brings you closer to it, without being consumed by it. You can love deeply without losing yourself. You can contribute without needing applause. You can walk alone without feeling lonely. This is why the truly grounded rarely announce themselves, why they move quietly, why their lives feel strangely untouchable, because they are no longer trying to escape discomfort. They have learned to stand still inside it. And once you experience this, there is only one question left. What do you do with a life that no longer needs to be justified? If you've stayed until now, it's not because of curiosity alone. It's because something inside you recognized itself along the way. These signals were never meant to impress you. They were meant to wake you up, not to turn you into someone else, but to return you to who you were before the world taught you to chase approval, perform worth, and measure your value through the eyes of others. What you've been feeling, the discomfort, the pull inward, the loss of appetite for noise, the strange peace mixed with uncertainty, none of it is random. It's a calling, not the loud kind, the quiet one that only comes when you're ready to listen. Every signal we explored points to the same truth. Your life is not meant to be lived as a reaction. You were not created to beg for space in rooms that shrink you. You were not meant to dilute yourself, to be digestible. You were not meant to live exhausted by the need to be chosen. The awakening begins when you stop asking the world who you are and start answering that question from within. This path doesn't remove challenges, it reframes them. Rejection becomes redirection. Silence becomes instruction. Solitude becomes initiation. And slowly you realize something extraordinary. You are not late. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are shedding borrowed identities, shedding emotional dependencies, shedding lives that were never truly yours. This is how consciousness expands, not through accumulation, but through release. And when you choose this path, something bigger than you begins to move through you. Your presence becomes stabilizing. Your words become intentional. Your choices become aligned, not because you force them, but because you no longer fight yourself. This is the spiritual maturity few talk about. The stage where love is no longer a transaction, where success is no longer a performance, where worth is no longer negotiated. You start living from a center that doesn't collapse under pressure. And here's the most hopeful part of all. This isn't reserved for monks, mystics, or extraordinary people. It's available to anyone willing to stop running from themselves, including you. If something in this journey resonated, if you felt seen, challenged, or quietly strengthened, acknowledge it. Leave a comment with your name and your city. I read them. And in the next video, I'll be sharing a few, because this path is walked silently but never alone. If this message brought clarity, like the video. If you feel called to continue this exploration, subscribe to the channel. Not to follow a voice, but to be reminded of your own. Because this space exists for those who value depth over noise, truth over performance, consciousness over conditioning. And as you move forward, remember this. You don't need to disappear from the world to be free. You don't need to reject humanity to be whole. You only need to stop abandoning yourself. The moment you do, everything else begins to align. And the most important part of this journey, it doesn't end here.